Tonight. With me also helping is Jacob Wilson, who's our chair, and will be our timekeeper this evening. If you're a Clayton resident or property owner or work in Clayton and would like more information, we do especially suggest a Facebook site. There's also a website where you can sign up to our email list. If neither of those work for you and you want to be on our email list, see me afterwards and I'll take your email and make sure you get our emails, which don't come that often. I want to start off by thanking Pastor Dwayne for hosting us in Resurrection in the city, for providing this space for us, and they've been great community neighbors. I do want to ask the candidates, I understand some folks have put up yard signs on the church property. At the end of the evening, I'd ask you to please take those down because the church does not support individual candidates, I believe. I want to emphasize that the questions that we'll be asking tonight came from the community. I've done some editing and assembling of those, but they did come from the community. These were the questions that people had and wanted answers to. And tonight is a forum. It's not a debate. We won't be going back and forth with rebuttals. It's really an opportunity for all of you to get to know the candidates. We'll be starting with the 3 D9 candidates, and then we'll be moving on to the at-large candidates after a short break. The format tonight is that we're going to provide a little bit of time for the candidates to introduce themselves, and then we'll have questions. There will be a limited amount of time to answer those questions, and I will tell the candidates what that time is. Jacob there is our timekeeper. When you have 20 seconds left, he'll put a yellow card up. When your time is up, he'll put a red card up, and we'll move on. I would ask the audience to please, I know that there will be lots of things said tonight that you agree with. Ask you to hold your applause until the end. We have a lot of people here, a lot of people for the at-large race in particular whom we want to hear from, and if we do the applause thing after every response, we're not going to hear very much from the candidates. I know that you will also hear things you disagree with, and I'd ask you to keep your disagreement to yourselves. Yes, sir.
Where do you submit your questions? You said something earlier about...
We already did that. We did that when we did that at the last Clayton RNO meeting, and I invited people as we sent out emails and on Facebook for people to send in questions.
Okay, moving forward, would it be the same process?
If we do another forum, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, do the candidates have any questions for me before we begin?
The opening statements, how long is that again?
We'll get to that. We're going to give you 4 minutes each for the District 9 candidates. We're going to start, you'll see the candidates are seated in alphabetical order. We're going to start with Juan, and then we'll rotate from there. So we'd ask Juan to start with 4 minutes.
All right, how y'all doing? My name is Quan Atlas. I am a candidate for City Council District 9, and I'm so thankful that you all are here today. Tell you a little bit about myself. I am a Denver native. I grew up in mainly the east side and the far northeast. My great-grandmother lived on 29th and Poplar, so familiar with these neighborhoods, and I've been living in 5 Points the last couple years. I went to Colorado State University. That's where I got my bachelor's in economics, and really started to get involved in politics. I was in politics up there, helping get good people elected, and had the opportunity to come down when I moved to Denver to get involved here. I've worked at all 3 levels of government, and when looking at this race, I decided that it was time to have somebody that was more responsive and really just believed in being involved in the community. I'm involved in a lot of community organizations, and I really believe in the passion of community-led government, something that I try to champion while working at the city. And I'm so blessed to be here today to talk about some of my policy positions and really why I think I'm the best candidate for you all to put forth. And welcome the questions that Clayton has put together. This is the first conversation of many that you get to hear from us, and I just want you all to know that I don't take this opportunity lightly, and would welcome you to come to my website at quanatlas.com, contact me, ask me some questions so that I can answer your questions, and even give me a call. And I'm a very responsive person, someone who's really trying to earn your vote. So thank you for being here tonight, and let's get into it.
Thanks. Eddie.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Candy Sadevaca. I'm your District 9 Councilwoman right now. I am a fifth-generation native of this district. If you've been in this district for a while, you know me, you know my family. I'm a social worker by training, a community organizer by necessity and hobby, and a policy expert. I never wanted to get into politics. I don't do politics, I do policy. So it's a dirty word when someone calls me a politician, because that's never been my aspiration. My aspiration has always been to serve community by any means necessary, whether it was as a social worker, whether it was as a youth development expert, as a founder of many, many organizations that serve this community. That's what I've always done. That's what I always will do. Prior to coming to council, I founded a nonprofit as a college student. I'm a proud Thunderbolt. And the nonprofit that I founded was Project Voice. It's been on 29th and Downing for about 16 years. We have almost exclusively existed to insert youth voice into policy. And it was my young people in this community that catalyzed my initial race in 2019 for city council. And they catalyzed that race because they were being displaced from this neighborhood at alarming rates. And they were doing everything perfectly, textbook advocacy, and they were finding it impossible to make changes in their community because they didn't have people on the inside who wanted to co-govern, who were responsive to them. And so they put me up for the job, and I won an impossible race and have been doing exactly what I committed to the people the first time around. I'm one of those people that you elect to government that is kind of a unicorn. I have done exactly what I promised I would do, and it's made a lot of people mad, which we can expect, but I'm proud of it because I've done the will of the people. I've done what you all have asked me to do, and that's what I want to continue doing. We've barely gotten started in the last 4 years. We've single-handedly changed the way that people engage with government, and a lot of people think that that we do too much to meet the people where they are. That's the way I'll put it. But we meet the people where they are, whether that is for young people on social media, for elderly people in their homes, whatever it takes, we're meeting people where they are in the most accessible way. We've set the pace for government on how people are communicated with. We do a weekly newsletter that is not just giving you information about what has happened. We give you information about how you can get involved and be active in what's happening in your neighborhood. We believe in co-governance in our District 9 office. We have spent the most money of any council district office on staff to serve you, to make sure we are responsive. And counter to what you might hear tonight, if you've engaged with our office, you know our office is one of the most responsive city council offices in the city. In fact, we have people from all over the city who say, my council office is non-responsive. Can you guys help us out? And we do, because that's what we do. I'm a social worker, and we treat every case like a case. It's not a 311 call. We don't route anybody to 311. We make sure we follow up, we serve people, we circle back, and we have stakeholder groups that have informed policy. We have made some of the biggest changes that a first-time elected official has ever made in this city. And we've changed what is possible for city council. Because while we have a strong mayoral...
Okay, I'm sorry, that's time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll keep going.
Can I remind the audience of my request to please hold your applause till the end. Otherwise, we won't get a chance to hear from all of the candidates. We've got a lot of candidates ahead of us. Thank you.
Good evening, Clayton neighbors. My name is Darrell Watson. I appreciate you hosting this important discussion tonight. This is the first discussion of the candidates for City Council District 9. So I appreciate the time and effort that you put into this. As a black man, it will be remiss of me to not call out the murder that occurred in Memphis this past week. We cannot forget what happened in Memphis. We as a community need to come together collectively to ensure that we pass real police reform in this city and that we push our federal leaders to pass the George Floyd Act federally. I want to share a little bit of my background that qualifies me to be your next City Council person for City Council District 9. After a 30-year career in finance, I retired 3 years ago with my fantastic husband that's sitting right there. We started the Watson Wayne Group. The Watson Wayne Group is a consulting firm that provides leadership, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion training to nonprofits, for-profits, and governmental agencies. One of our crowning moments was our collaboration with the Urban Land Conservancy, Denver Public Schools, and Denver Housing Authority in the purchase of the Johnson & Wales campus. That collaboration and those partnerships on that campus are developing today and tomorrow some of the most deeply affordable housing ever in Park Hill, deed-restricted housing that will be there for the next 99 years. Another part of my qualifications is my community involvement and my community leadership. As the chair of the Housing Stability Strategic Advisors Board, along with the Department of Housing Stability, with many city council members and many of you in this room, we passed the first of its kind housing mandate for affordable housing in the state of Colorado. No other city in the state of Colorado has an affordable housing mandate, and we passed that. We moved that policy to Denver City Council and had the vote of 12 city council members approving and passing that policy to mandate affordable housing, except for one city council member. As the chair and current founding member of the Denver Park Trust, we have, over the last 2.5 years, during a pandemic, invested $250,000, actually even more, in quality parks or improving parks throughout D9, in 5 Points, in Cole, and in Whittier, and we're just beginning. Let me share with you, neighbors in Clayton, I have been in this neighborhood and in Skyland. I run up and down Skyland and Cole and Clayton. It's part of my 5-mile run that I do once a week. And I've been listening to you for the past year and a half, and you have been crystal clear as to what your policies and your priorities are for the next city council person. Your first priority is that you want a council person that is responsive, one that responds to you and prioritizes your neighborhood and your businesses. Second, you want a council person that will fight for attainable and affordable housing while keeping a keen eye on the unsheltered and the unhoused and ensuring that we reduce the amount of time that people are living and dying on our streets. 300 folks died last year, and if we don't do more will die this year. You want to make sure that we have healthy communities. And my good work with the Denver Park Trust and working throughout the city, we're leading on that. We're making sure we have quality parks and making sure that we have safe communities. I want to share with you neighbors, I want to hear your voices. I ask for your support because change is needed today and tomorrow to enact the solutions that you in Clayton are asking for your council person to do. I'm doing that right now, and I will continue to do it as your next city council person. So thank you so much.
Thanks. As we move on to the first question, we'll start with Candy. You'll each have 3 minutes for this. If elected, what will be your priorities with regards to Clayton and the immediately surrounding neighborhoods?
I think one of the things that's consistent with me is that my priorities don't change based on the neighborhoods, because I believe that all neighborhoods want the same thing. We all want housing that is affordable, that we can count on, that we can plant roots in. We all want healthy, safe communities, and all of us want transparency and accountability from our government. And so those are my priorities in everything that I do. In this neighborhood specifically, what we know is that gentrification is moving northward. And so we're right on the line here in Clayton of a transition point. Whittier has turned over completely. Clayton, Skyland, Cole, and everything northward is in transition. And so affordability is a high priority in this community, but making sure people are engaged in a way that they can understand what's happening in their government beyond bill titles like expanding housing affordability. That simplifies something and dilutes it to a level that people think they're getting something good when they're actually harming themselves in their communities to create private profit for someone else on their backs. And so I want this community to be informed. I want to continue to do what we've been doing with our stakeholder groups, where they've informed what is happening. I also want to address big projects that are happening right on our borders. Park Hill Golf Course is right on the Clayton border. It will have a direct impact on this neighborhood, especially with affordability, especially with the environment. There has been nobody on City Council who has fought harder for affordable housing than I have. In fact, there's nobody on council or in this race who's actually created permanently affordable, at the deepest affordability for these neighborhoods. I've done that with our community land trust, the only one in the city that's actually community led. And so I want to continue to do that. We want to expand the land trust. I also want to continue fighting for the environment. I got in this game because of I-70. We're right on the edge of the most polluted zip code in America, and half of Park Hill Golf Courses as well. The last thing we need to be doing is getting rid of green and open space that's there to clean our air as a buffer for what we're experiencing in these communities. So I want to continue that. Participatory budgeting was piloted in the Cole and Clayton neighborhoods through my organization before I came to council. And we have it in City Council now, and I want to expand the budget for that and make sure that we're giving these neighborhoods an opportunity to have a say on what's in our budget.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for the question, Fred. And I'll start by saying, I am, as a city council person, I will not be the sole identifier of truth and righteousness. I am not the only person on council that will be leading to serve all people. I will be working collectively with all 12 other city council members to make sure that you and your communities are served across city and county of Denver. I don't have all the ideas. I don't have all of the truth. But what I do know in this room and in each of you and your families and your businesses, you have those. And I see Frederick Soul sitting back there. He owns a business in Clayton. And so let's go back to Clayton and what my support will be. As Frederick was trying to open his small business within the Clayton neighborhood, 18 months of setbacks, 18 months of cost for his family to start a business on a strip in Clayton that no one else had a strong business. Cohesion Brewery moved in as well. As your city council member, Frederick, and other small business owners in this room, I will reduce the time for permits from 18 months down to 3 months to 4 months, where it used to be about 15 years ago. That is true leadership coming from leaders, from people in the community. What does Clayton need? They need a council person that when they call that person is available. That they listen to their needs, they elevate solutions from the Clayton neighborhood. For example, Clayton is developing, and our council member just says that gentrification is coming in. For 4 years, we have not advanced an area plan for the Clayton neighborhood. The Clayton neighbors have not been sat down with and spoken to by this council office to ask, what are your thoughts about gentrification? What are your thoughts about development? What are your thoughts about transportation? What are your thoughts about small business support and subsidies for rental subsidies to ensure that you and your families can stay in the homes that you love and that you live and the community that you live in? My priority will be to reduce the amount of time that folks go through this area plan process. It takes 2 years. It is insanity for an area plan to take that long. I'll work with community members like Frederick and others in Clayton to listen to their thoughts about how they want to grow their neighborhood, and we will do it together. Displacement, gentrification happens because of no planning. We need, as a community, to work together to plan the communities that we want, and we need to elect a city council person that will listen to that community and execute on those communities' wills, not their own.
Thanks. Quan.
It's an excellent question. If elected, first thing I would do is really speak to folks where they're at. And really, we got to clear out a lot of misnomers that have come into the Denver politics over the last couple of years. When we talk about gentrification, we're really talking about the increase in the cost of living and folks not being able to keep up because of the lack of wages. What we need to do is invest in our people, invest in our businesses, and really be talking about ownership. That's something that I really bring to the table. It's something that my organization, Metro Deep, has piloted. We actually put 7 African-American families into home ownership by looking at the credit problems that they were having and putting our money where our mouth is. those families are not going to be easily moved if they have ownership. So part of the things that I want to pilot as well is incentives to move from apartments to condos. We see all the development is on that side of things, which is putting high pressure on our for sale market. And that then puts more pressure to build more luxury housing. And so we can get folks to be incentivized to give that ownership to the next generation. We can actually save our neighborhoods. I'm not going to be somebody who's going to tell you, oh, this neighborhood's gone, this neighborhood's gone, this neighborhood's not for you anymore. We can reverse the tide. There are several African Americans, including myself, who live in the building that I'm in. If we were given ownership, all of us, maybe a couple years ago, we would have over $100,000 in equity. That's equity that we can bring to our next generation and into to create generational wealth. The second thing that I would do, and this is something that I wrote briefs on, I don't know if I mentioned that I was able to study, had the benefit of studying policy at the University of San Francisco, is really looking at our neighborhood governance. In the city and county of Denver, we don't really have a strong neighborhood governance models, and which leads to, if you are in these council conversations, it seems high stakes, right? If your person doesn't get elected, you may feel like, well, they're never going to show up to my RNO meeting, right? And they're never going to answer my call. Those are the things that people have been saying as we've knocked on and called over 9,000 people in this district. People want to be heard regardless of if they agree with you. And I commit to being that person. What I want to do is set up some sort of framework. We can create a neighborhood council of folks from different community organizations and neighborhood organizations like the Clayton RNO to come to the table when we have policy positions, we have grievances and problems with the city, to advance those issues so that I can hear a collective voice, not just listening to one part of the neighborhood or the other. We got to stop pitting ourselves against each other and really look at how we can come together. Let's build ownership in our community. Let's get our businesses open. Daryl's right. Our community planning process is too long. I actually had the burden of being that person to knock on the door and say, hey, development, what is going on with Duke's? Duke's was waiting 2 years to get open, and I got them open.
Thank you.
Thanks. Our next question, and we'll start with Daryl, and this is just a simple yes or no, please. Are you for rezoning all Denver neighborhoods for ADUs? Daryl?
Yes.
Quan?
Absolutely.
Andy?
Yes.
Thanks. Another yes or no question that came forward. Asked Quan to start first. Do you support the proposed development at Park Hill Golf Course as set out in the current approved small area plan and development agreement? Yes or no?
I would say yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Take notes, y'all. Yeah.
Our next question, and we'll start with Candy, and just 1 minute for this question. If you are elected, what is one concrete thing you will do within the first 90 days to advocate for affordable housing for Clayton neighbors who are struggling with regards to housing?
I think the biggest thing we need to do is amend the expanding housing affordability ordinance. We have a very dragged out timeline for what our expectations are from developers, both for what they build and for fee in lieu if they decide not to build and pay the linkage fee. And I think that they're getting all of the benefits on day one without having to provide what we expect on day one. And so I would like to amend EHA.
Thanks. Daryl?
I think one of the things that we really do need to look forward to is amending EHA is one thing, but it's really working with community to make sure that we have a plan for development within Clayton. We have identified there are properties that are owned by the city, whether it's by DPS and DHA that abuts the 39th Avenue Greenway, making sure that we put those properties in play and the city allows for development that could be a mix of deeply affordable and affordable housing along that strip. For me as an individual to say what I'm going to do to increase affordability without speaking to the neighbors, I think that's putting the cart a little bit before the horse, but I do know it's important to make sure we have a plan. There is city land that's owned there, and that'll be my priority for affordability.
Thanks. Quan?
Yeah, I think the first step would be to talk to you all and others in this neighborhood to see Where are there key areas in which we can upzone or talk about infilling? You cannot be committed to affordable housing if you're not committed to development, as well as giving property owners like many of yourself the opportunity to expand your property. And we have more units on the market, that puts more pressure on price. And if anybody who's not saying that is lying to you. The fact that in many of the single family areas that you see the most dramatic increase in the housing cost. And that is the key part of gentrification. Black and brown folks who maybe previously populated this area just couldn't keep up with the economic price of the previous units that are still here. And that's the gentrification. And that's not anybody's fault. That is the economic pressure that we have. But how do we reverse that? We got to build more units and then build in that affordability. And then we have to talk about real ownership. And
Thank
so
you.
with you all, I would do that.
Thanks. The next question, 3 minutes per candidate, and we'll start with Daryl. How will you work to improve transportation access and options for the district, especially transit, bike, and pedestrian access and safety?
That's a big one, Fred. And, I appreciate the question. As I shared earlier, I bike and I run and I commute through Clayton, Cole, Whittier. It's part of my regular process. I think it's extremely important to make sure that we put in place transportation that augments what the regional transportation district is providing. There's not consistent, there's not reliable transportation throughout the city. Let me share quickly about where my mom lives. She lives in Curtis Park. She catches a bus to and from Curtis Park to get to Safeway. It takes her 2 buses to go. That is her independence. She insists on doing that. She insists on not calling me to pick her up at Safeway. She needs transportation that's reliable. For many elders in Clayton, that transportation is not reliable with RTD. We have an amazing program in Montbello. It's called the Montbello Connector, and that's being scaled out to the Globeville community as well. We need to advance and scale that across District 9. And the Montbello Connector allows for free connection rideshare programs that provides the last mile and the first mile of transportation for not only our elders, but for us, for our community members throughout Clayton. That is essential. We need to review and support Denver Deserves Sidewalks. I supported that initiative. We need to make sure that we provide sidewalks throughout the Clayton and Skyline neighborhoods. And then we also need to have shared streets. As a biker, it is not safe. You are putting your life in your own hands as you bike up and down Denver throughout Cole and Clayton. And as a biker, I will make sure that the Denver Mobile Plan, we have a plan actually in place that has not been implemented, a mobility plan within the city and county of Denver. I will implement the mobility plan to ensure that we have shared streets so folks are safe walking, they're safe riding, and that Vision Zero, this great vision that the city put forward in 2018 to reduce vehicle deaths, and every year since 2018, vehicle deaths have increased. I'll put a very clear, keen eye to make sure that we're taking the steps to make sure our streets are safe for folks who are driving, biking, and walking. Those are the steps that I'll take in Clayton, and to make sure that folks, pedestrians and folks who are driving are safe throughout our communities.
Thank you, Joe. Quan?
Yeah, I think those are excellent ideas. Just building off that, shared streets. I believe that most of our streets need to have access for both our buses, our bikes, as well as scooters and walking. Micromobility is definitely going to be a key part of the solution, but really creating these protected bike lanes and streets that have all the different modes of transportation that folks really need and desire. And I think that's going to be part of the solution. Working with RNOs like yourself, we can build out a plan of prioritization. We did this process within the 5 Points neighborhood. If you're driving down Welton and Stoughton, California, you're starting to see some of that work that has happened. That should happen in all the different communities in Denver, and I'll be a champion in making sure we walk down these different proposals and get it done.
Thanks. Candy?
I think that my colleagues hit on some good points. Shared streets was a success across the city, and one of the reasons cited for taking it offline was that jaywalking was illegal. So we recently, just last night, decriminalized jaywalking, which is also a big issue in a neighborhood that doesn't have great infrastructure. It's not safe to cross at some of our intersections, especially 40th and Colorado Boulevard. And so that's part of the solution. The connector, the last mile connections, GES connector, we actually started that. That was a mitigation we required from I-70 during the expansion. And the city modeled the Montbello connector off of it. And then when we went offline with the I-70 mitigation, we put the GES connector into place. So that was community, that was us listening to community, that was part of our lawsuit. Would love to see that expanded, but also there's a big problem with our last mile connections. So our scooters, we allowed 2 companies to have a monopoly in this city over those contracts. And that's very problematic. And so that's something that council had authority to stop, but we did not. We passed that contract. And we need a mayor who wants to go back and renegotiate those contracts to end that. And then we would have the power to undo that and make sure that we make free programs or city-owned programs that are not exploiting people who don't have credit cards or ways to use those last mile connections. I also want to remind people that Dottie didn't exist until the 2019 campaign. We forced Dottie to be created by the administration at that time, because what we said is if RTD is abolished one day, which is a possibility, Denver needs to be buying up the assets so that we can have our local control over our local public transportation here. And I think that's something we need to be talking about. Most other big cities have triple layers of public transportation, and a local one is necessary with connectors. So that needs to happen. I also think that with all of the developments we're talking about, not all of them require transportation demand management plans. Not even Park Hill Golf Course. In an intersection like that, we need transportation demand management plans, because it is not safe for pedestrians over there. It is not safe for pedestrians crossing under the 38th and Walnut Bridge. And we don't have money for that study or those improvements. And I've asked for it every single year and we haven't gotten it. Those are big things as we densify, because they're life safety hazards. And so we need to be putting some of that burden on development and making sure that we have a mayor who's making that happen. And I also had Dottie out here just recently on a field trip, making sure that they make bikeways that connect to places, not just bikeways.
Our next question we'll ask Juan to start with, and you'll have 3 minutes each for this as well. Candidates often focus on what they want to change in the city, but give us an example of a city department or program you think is successful, and tell us how you will approach strengthening existing departments and staff. Juan.
That is a great. That is really hard.
Worked at the mayor's office.
I worked in the mayor's office, yes. But leaving the city, there's a lot of work still left undone, and that's why I'm running. I'm not necessarily happy with many of the agencies at the city and county of Denver. I'm not happy with the quality of service that we've been given in the city and county of Denver. And I really want to change almost every agency there. I think what's been awesome to see, if I did have to point to any of them, is the Climate Resiliency Office. I do want more diversity there, but in that office, they have put a lot of great programs forward to really bring us into the future, and they're giving lots of great information on social media on how to be more sustainable. I was an eco leader in college, knocking on my the dorm rooms of folks and telling them, you know, here's a water timer. Here's how we're gonna do more recycling and composting. So to see the city move that forward, and some of the great people that work there, I think that's something to be proud of and expand. I want to see more charging stations for folks and give folks more access. My philosophy isn't necessarily that we gotta, you know, be tough on everybody and, you know, all that type of stuff. We got to give people real solutions where we can all do our part to fight climate and save our planet. And so I really love that agency in particular, but pretty much every other agency, I got some bones to pick with them.
Thank you. Candy.
You would think that this wouldn't come out of my mouth, because I have a lot of critiques about the city, but my critiques are about the leadership. I think that everybody in every agency is busting their ass to do what they can with very little leadership and guidance. I would say Denver Human Services, those are some of the hardest working people in this city. They have deployed them for literally whatever we needed throughout the pandemic, throughout the last couple of years. They're an agency that meets all of our basic needs that could use a lot of support and be strengthened in a lot of creative ways by giving power to the workers to decide, how do we get things done? How do we eliminate some of this bureaucracy? But I also think that it's not technically part of the administration, but our auditor's office has put out some of the best audits over the last 4 years, highlighting the gaps in our city and what we need to be doing differently to improve a lot of different agencies. And so actually listening to our auditor and implementing the recommendations that are made would make a lot of different agencies much better.
Thanks. Daryl?
Hey, I think that's an amazing question. I think it's so easy to complain and to attack civil servants. And as we work with these folks who have dedicated their lives, whether it's to Denver housing, whether it's in CASTR for climate, whether it's in the housing stability department where I work very closely with them. These are folks who for 15, 20, some 30 years have dedicated their lives to serving the folks in this city. I strongly applaud each and every department in the city because it can't be easy doing the work that they do, holding community meetings, being yelled at and screamed at on a regular. It can't be easy. And I'm looking at some city employees right now. I'm not calling your name out, Roger Cobb, but it can be easy. And so as a candidate for Denver City Council, let me be clear to you, if you're working for the City County of Denver, I am your cheerleader. I am your best friend. I will fight for you every second of every day that I'm in Denver City Council. But to answer the question directly, the Department of Housing Stability is a new department with a great, amazing, necessary role within the city. A city that is facing a housing crisis where folks who love this city, who work and clean this city, from our union members to our restaurant workers, they can't live in this city. They can't afford it because the city is not affordable. It's not attainable. Our permit process is crap. The Department of Housing Stability does an amazing job ensuring that many of us in this room can stay in the communities with the families that we love and the places that we grew up, and that we can remain here and build our lives. I applaud their daily work for focusing on affordable housing, attainable housing, the full spectrum of housing, for doubling down on spending for the STAR system and provide alternative responses for police action and police contact. These folks do great work with little money, little attention, very little applause. And so I applaud all civil servants, all city employees, and specifically I hold up the Department of Housing Stability for the great work that they're doing, thankless job that they have, in a role that seems impossible in a city that continues to be deeply, deeply unaffordable. As a council person, I will be there standing with them, implementing policies and ensuring that you, each of you in Clayton neighborhood and neighbors around, can stay in the communities that you love.
Thank you. Next question, 2 minutes each, and we'll start with Candy. Give us an example of a time when you worked collaboratively with folks you disagreed with to accomplish something.
Ooh, in the last 3 months, we've had some big wins. Every bill that I've sponsored is typically with a colleague. And so we recently passed jaywalking with, or decriminalizing jaywalking with Torres and Clark. We recently passed the mobile home moratorium that was with Torres and Clark as well. I just came from a meeting with Sawyer and Herndon because we've proposed the DOA overlay on Colfax to make it more pedestrian friendly. That will be coming down the pipe. I had a recent success, I would say, with Sawyer, because we passed the right to eviction council together. That has really changed the way we do or plug the hole to homelessness, plug the pipeline to homelessness. Those are some of the examples. We have a long list of them, but those are not the ones you get to hear about in the news.
Thanks, Gerald.
I think that the sign of a true leader is to be humble, to be curious, and to be interested in the voices of folks, especially those that don't listen to you. And most of my life, that has been the kind of work that I've leaned into. I remember working with Councilmember Jolene Clark on dedicated funding for parks, and really working through communities who believed that it was not the right time, the right place to put this initiative on the ballot. We did. I remember working with community in the Whittier neighborhood as the president of the Registered Neighborhood Organization, and walking through a process on gentrification. Some of the first discussions on the east side on gentrification way back in 1998, meeting with leaders throughout that weren't happy with our discussions, weren't happy that we're starting it, weren't happy that people felt they were being shamed by this discussion. Working collaboratively with community, with Denver Police and City Council to create the Denver Police Bias Policing Task Force, once again, way back in 2000s, when folks were discussing the impact on lives of Black men and bias policing on LGBTQ communities. We brought forward a whole host of folks that were not in agreement, and we put forward processes that still work and inform how police are trained and how they contact community. One.
Yeah, two examples. So if you may not remember that our Capitol used to be purple. We had a red Senate, and during that time, we were able to pass the actually first police transparency bill that looked at internal affairs records, and that was with the chief of police and different folks from around the city, as well as the media coming to the table. Folks did not agree, and they were going to try to kill our bill, but we were able to bring folks together and get that done. My second example is actually Ashley Wedgeworth. We came into the Urban League. She's actually the president. I'm the vice president, and Ashley's in Candy's office. And we didn't really like each other, but we have come together and we've built a great organization and a great friendship. And it's just an example of, even though she's clearly in the office of Candy Sidabaka and a supporter of Candy, we're great friends and someone that I can work with even when I'm elected. And so that's just my style. I don't care what you believe in. Let's find something that we agree on. Let's get to work.
Thank you. Our final question, we'll start
Wage
with Sarah.
theft. Sorry. Wage theft.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're going to start, we're going to do our last question, 2 minutes. We'll start with Daryl. What work are you doing right now to benefit the people of District 9?
I think in two ways. First and foremost, on the housing board, I spoke to the policy work that we're currently doing collectively with community. There's one policy that's on the way to City Council that provides the opportunities, the prioritization policy. It provides a prioritization of folks who have been displaced from communities of color, from Whittier to Cole, to have first priority for affordable housing that's built with taxpayer dollars. It's first of its kind policy, and we're working collaboratively, discussing with community, with the department, and also working collaboratively with City Council. Also, as the chair of the Denver Park Trust, working collaboratively to ensure that we have a 10-minute walk and roll for all of the communities that make up D9 and the communities across the inverted L. These are powerful, important things that have legacy impacts on our families, our businesses for generations. And I'm proud to work collectively with folks on both of those things.
Thanks, Quan.
Yeah, so a few things. I helped start the Welton Street initiative, which was focused on bringing more vibrancy to Welton Street. So we raised a couple $100,000 to invest in murals and bring a stage to 5 Points to something in the district. If you didn't make the connection, my name is Quan Atlas. I helped start the 5 Points Atlas newspaper, and that was really born at talking to business owners, and they were feeling like nobody knew that they were there. And so we're getting the word out about businesses and helping folks with low-cost advertising, really connecting the neighborhood, and that was something that one of my proudest accomplishments. Outside of that, we are working with Black and brown families to educate them, financial education, provide entrepreneurial opportunities, and really get them into home ownership. That's passionate about ownership, and that's as the way of getting folks actually into generational wealth. And I think beyond that, I'm a father. I'm raising a son in your neighborhood, and he's learning in the community. And I think just doing my part to impact him and and serve as many ways as I can. And I'll be so grateful to have your support in this next journey of service to you all.
Thanks. Candy.
Thank you, Daryl, for helping us with the prioritization policy. That's something I'm also working on. I mentioned a lot of things earlier. I shouted out wage theft. That's huge for our district because we have a high concentration of low-wage workers in our district keeping it running. And wage theft is the biggest type of theft happening of all types of theft. And so that's a huge protection for our community. We have also helped all of the clinics in our neighborhood, Denver Health employees, to unionize. We've worked with all of our libraries and staff across our district to unionize libraries. We also brought you the first community-owned grocery store here in Swansea with the East Denver Food Sovereignty Initiative. They told us over and over for all of my life to wait for a grocery store, and we don't want to wait anymore, so we built our own. That's coming soon. I continue to work with the Community Land Trust and expanding opportunities for permanent, deep, affordable home ownership. Also, we've brought and expanded co-ops to our neighborhood, a lot of different kinds, and I'm looking to hopefully make that a priority in our procurement processes for the city, so that before we consider corporations, we're looking to co-ops in our neighborhoods, and converting businesses to employee-owned businesses and cooperatives, because people want to own their own labor nowadays. Go figure. And Quan mentioned earlier that we need governance structures in our neighborhoods. Well, we have one. You guys, RNOs. We're trying to reform them though, so that we're making sure that they are more representative, they are more supported, and that has been in the works for a couple of years. So we've been working with researchers at the University of Colorado, and hopefully that's coming to you too.
Great. I want to, if everybody just join me in thanking the three candidates. We will now take a 10-minute break, and then we will have the at-large candidates. I've asked the at-large candidates to come up and join me up here so we can get settled. There are restrooms just up those stairs right there to your left. Thank you. We're gonna put you guys alphabetic. Okay. Would be the idea. There. Got it. Thank you.
Sharing all the library union. I figured that might be you. It's so good to see you too. Absolutely. Wow. Brother Jeff, thank you for making it accessible.
What'd you think?
Oh, it was great. You know, our girl rocked it. She brought in the policy, the analysis, and the passion. So, Jennifer, we appreciate it. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Oh my God.
What'd you think? Great.
So anyway, we'll talk more about it.
Find out. So I had your card. I had your card right here.
Candy, what you think?
Right.
What you think?
What did y'all think?
Amazing.
It was great.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting. I hope you got the information. If you need any more, as always, just give us a call and we'll get you more information about whatever you have questions on. Thank you.
Kathy's watching. Tell her hello.
Oh, hi, Kathy. And all the rest of you out there in TV land. Joe Morrow. Good to see you, sir.
I have a couple other just window signs. I'll have yours soon. Thanks.
We're getting ready for the district. This is the city. The city at large.
How are you?
Sir, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
You all ready?
Sure.
You ready?
You know it.
You ready?
Hey, how are you?
All right.
I still love this shirt.
It's Penfield. Penfield, are you ready?
I'm ready, sir.
All right. There you go.
Sir, how you doing?
It's good to see you. I'm in talking to you. Calendar. It's hard.
They're all there. There's Serena. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Let's do it.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. I want to get started again because we do have 8 candidates, which means it's very challenging for everybody to get through this. So I want to thank you all. Just as a reminder to please hold your applause. There's limited time and a lot of candidates, so we've necessarily shortened some of the question response times. New timekeeper is my wife Donna over there. The yellow when you have 20 seconds left, and then red it's time to stop, and I will cut you off. I'd like to start with introductions, and we're going to start, we've seated everybody alphabetically. We're going to start at this end, work our way down. Give you each 3 minutes to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves, please.
Thanks so much, Fred. First of all, apologies. I am getting over a horrible cold, and so you probably won't be able to hear me. And I rolled my ankle this morning, so I'm a little drugged up. So, but my name is Will Chan. I am running for Denver City Council at large. Born and raised on the west side. My parents were refugees that came to this country over 40 years ago. Came here for that dream that everyone here in this room has. Wanting a better life, wanting great opportunities to raise their family, wanting a safe community. And that was what I grew up with. These are the values I grew up with in our little small business where Denver took care of me. Denver took care of our family. Denver welcomed us. And that's a Denver that I grew up with, and that's a Denver that I knew. And that's what got me into public service. And that was where I was helping navigate and provide resources for other people like my family that were struggling in this country, that were trying to make ends meet day to day, and seeing those systems at play each and every day growing up as that navigator for my family, and then translating it into my work in government has really propelled me to do better for all our communities. So when I started when I graduated from college, I worked in unions. So I worked in Puerto Rico as a union organizer early on and saw the power of collective bargaining and bringing people together and seeing how powerful coalition is and how powerful community voices are. And that really resonated with me throughout my whole career. When I moved back here to take care of my mother when my father passed away, I really kept that as like a North Star for myself. Entering into the immigrant refugee service work, using libraries as third spaces, really propelling that conversation forward, again, with that principle of how can we do better as a city? How can we adapt and evolve as a city from what I knew and the challenges growing up, and how can we do better? So it's been 20 years in public service, managing millions of dollars of public funding, working nationally with the White House Initiative for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to really propel DACA initiatives forward, managing $154 million for Denver's Economic Recovery Plan most recently. And then when I rolled my ankle this morning was, again, assisting with the migrant shelters. So I have delivered and understand how to navigate community voices and translate those into concrete actions in the legislative body. I know the city is not perfect, and there's a lot of bureaucracy, but I think I have the proven track record of being able to be that champion and be that voice. And I thank you for your time. I think there's also a piece that is just important for representation. There's never been an Asian American elected to Denver office ever. And so for me, it's also important for me to be here and be that voice for our communities. And so I thank you for your time and look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Serena.
Hi, everybody. My name is Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez, and have a couple of hats. I'm a mom of 3 amazing children. I am a third generation North High School graduate, so don't hold it against me. I know we're not in the North Side. I am also currently a state representative representing House District 4 in Northwest and West Denver, and I've served in the legislature for the last 4 years, going on to my 5th. I've also had the opportunity to work in the city and county of Denver for nearly the last 20 years, working with our kids and families who are experiencing system involvement and are at the heart of, what our city is facing. And I can tell you, even from my own experience growing up in this city, my family growing up in the city, fighting the injustices that have happened to us, not with us, right? My mother was displaced as a child for the building of Auraria campus back in the 60s. So when we talk about issues around housing, we know from our own lived experience, growing up in North Denver, where we have seen things just take on a life of their own. It is something that I am incredibly honored to be able to serve a community that I am from. And over the last few years in the legislature, I've had the great opportunity to be able to make historical investments in our behavioral health care system to address root causes of crime, right? We've also had the ability to invest over $500 million in affordable housing that is funneled down to our local governments to be able to then implement policy to make sure that we are taking care of folks that are unhoused. We're implementing programming that is proven to work, that we are also addressing the needs for renters and rental protections, which I have been so glad to be able to partner with many community organizations right here in Denver to make sure that we are protecting those, making sure that those folks that are housed stay housed, and that we prevent evictions. And lastly, over the last 20 years, working with the kids and families that I've worked with, seeing the challenges that our community has faced over the years, knowing what's happening in Montbello and Green Valley Ranch and what's happening in Southwest Denver, unfortunately, our young people, we need to make sure we're taking care of them. We need to make sure that we are investing in those folks. And as the next Denver City Council member at large, what I intend to do is to make sure that I'm listening to the community, to make sure that I'm collaborating with partners, local, state, because we know that that's what it takes. And I have the experience and a proven track record to make sure that that happens.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Hoffman. Thank you all so much for allowing me to come speak with you tonight. I live with my wife and 3 young daughters in South Central Denver. I'm hoping that they're all asleep at this point. This campaign in a lot of ways started for me just over 3 years ago when I was hit by a pickup truck while I was biking home. I was about 4 blocks from my house, landed on my head and suffered a traumatic brain injury. I was out of work for 6 months, and I spent the better part of a year and a half relearning how to walk and talk and do basic tasks around the house, like make a morning cup of coffee. And anyone in this room who has gone through any sort of recovery like that, or faced a job loss, the death of a loved one, knows that when you're coming through that, when you're trying to get to the other side of it, that process is not linear. There are some really good days and there are some bad days. There are times and milestones that you achieve, and there are setbacks that you have to endure. And I'm in this race for one of the 2 at-large seats for city council, because as I speak with Denverites around the city in each of the 78 neighborhoods, I hear their concerns about the scale of the challenges that we face around crime, around affordability, around displacement, around the environment, around infrastructure. But I also hear in those conversations an optimism that is reflected in my own experience and in my own recovery. That if you have people who are willing to do the hard work in front of them, if those people have a community around them willing to engage with them and lift them up when they fall, and if you have people who have a clear vision for where they're trying to go, you can take on those challenges, you can address the big problems that we're facing. One of the problems that we face, and I think people experience this in very different ways, is crime that's taken place in Denver. I've spent the last 5.5 years working as a prosecutor at the district attorney's office. And a lot of what Serena was talking about, I saw firsthand every single day. That people who were coming into my courtroom as victims, as family members and defendants, were oftentimes dealing with a potent combination of addiction, mental health issues, financial insecurity, and housing instability. A lot of these systemic problems that often serve as the root cause of a lot of criminal behavior that we see here in Denver. And the reality is that by the time they're in a courtroom with me, it's oftentimes too late. We have diversionary programs, we have treatment programs, and those should be bolstered and those should be strengthened. But what excites me about this race, why I'm in it and why I'm asking for your support tonight, is that opportunity and that ability to move upstream of the criminal justice system, provide some of the stabilizing factors in our community 9 months before the crime takes place, 18 months before the crime takes place, so that people aren't entering the criminal justice system at all. I'm really looking forward to answering some of the questions tonight. Thank you all so much for the time.
Thank you. Travis.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Travis Leiker, and I'm a candidate for Denver City Council at large. I am new to Denver, newish to Denver. I moved here 16 years ago, moved to Colorado 25 years ago. I was born in Kansas, Kansas native, and during the course of my childhood, I moved around quite a bit. I lived in 5 states before I was the age of 16, and then I landed in Broomfield and went to Broomfield High School. And that moment in my life and that experience growing up as a young, then closeted gay kid, and living throughout the country taught me a couple of things. One, the importance and value of roots and being connected to one's community. I didn't have that when I was growing up. 2, feeling safe about your surroundings and the environment and making sure that you live in a diverse and inclusive and welcoming environment. And then I moved to Colorado in '97 and thought, wow, where did I move to? Because it was welcoming, it was inclusive, and it was somewhere where I could be safe and be me. And who knew that you could say that about the outer ring suburbs of Denver? But then I had my first meal on the 16th Street Mall with my family as a kid, as a teenager, and then I saw people like me. And then I was drawn to the magnetism of Denver and its magnificence. And then I saw people and I identified with people who were like me. Even though I was closeted, I knew what I saw, and I identified with folks. And why does that meal still resonate with me? 1, because I knew that this was the place where I wanted to be. 2, that this is where I wanted to make my career. And 3, this is where I wanted to give back to my community, and that's why I'm here today. Now, in the context of my professional background and trajectory, I went to CU Boulder for my undergraduate degree in political science. I'm finally putting that poli-sci degree to use. 2, I have a graduate degree from from the School of Public Affairs at CU, so I have additional background and training in public policy. I got my career working for a gentleman named Jared Polis, who's now our current governor, working on issues such as payday lending reform to make sure that we stop predatory lending. I also championed tuition equity legislation for undocumented youth at the time. I then worked in the conservation movement, and then I worked in the women's rights movement, the White House Project training women to run for political office. And then now I've been at the University of Colorado for the last 10 years, where I have spearheaded a number of academic research projects around pharmaceuticals and clinical trials to improve our healthcare outcomes, also launching vaccine clinics in those communities that need it the most, and then finally supporting diversity scholarships and pipeline programming for students who seek to get a degree in the health sciences. Now, concurrent to my professional degree, I've been board chair of 2 nonprofits that were near bankruptcy. One is Capitol Hill United Neighborhoods, and then the other is NARAL Pro-Choice Colorado.
Thank you.
And I'll get to more of my bio later.
Thank you. Sarah.
Hi, everybody. My name's Sarah Parody. I'm a workers and civil rights attorney. I live in the neighborhood at 23rd and Lafayette with my kiddos, so this is my council district as well. And so my career in Denver had started out actually as a foreclosure attorney at Legal Aid during the foreclosure crisis. That was my first job as a lawyer, and that was how I got to know the city, kind of going, crisscrossing the city to my clients' homes, sitting in their living rooms, looking over all of their documents. about their financial situation, about their mortgage, and all the rest of that, meeting their dogs, eating their brownies, all that kind of thing. And I'm very struck today as we look at the housing situation in Denver by the fact that back in those days, the thousands of families in Denver who lost their homes to foreclosure lost essentially a gold mine. If they still owned those homes today, they would be wealthy, and oftentimes they lost their homes for want of a couple of months of mortgage assistance. So that has stuck with me. In the years since then, I've primarily, as I said, been doing workers' rights and civil rights litigation. I founded a small law firm over a decade ago, specifically because my now law partners and I felt that at the firms where we were working, we were turning away mostly working class people and representing more upper income people. And so there was a huge gap in representation. Legal aid in Denver, for the most part, doesn't do employment work. So we opened our firm specifically to serve lower wage workers, and we've done that for all those years. Not a good business model, but I'm very proud of the work that we've done. We've done lots of low wage worker wage theft class actions, lots of work in the disability space, so trying to get employers to accommodate folks with disabilities. One of the great ironies of the pandemic was the number of times that I argued in court leading up to the pandemic that my clients could be accommodated with remote work, that the employer could make that possible for them. Companies would come in and say, oh, we couldn't possibly, and then it turned out, come 2 years ago, that in fact they could, and they did. So where there's a will, there's a way. We've also done a lot of work on LGBTQ rights cases. One of my particular specialties is healthcare for trans folks. I was proud in 2017 to be the Center's Ally of the Year or Barrister of the Year, something like that. So in the course of doing that legal work, I've typically been in the position of sort of standing up to better funded entities on the other side. I am not intimidated by money and power, and I'm not going to change that if I'm on city council. I also, however, am a small business owner and got drawn into a lot of bar leadership over the years of practicing as an attorney. So I was the president of the Colorado Women's Bar Association, which is one of the biggest bar groups in the state, and which does quite a bit of lobbying at the state legislature. In that capacity, I wrote the 2019 Colorado Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, which I have to recognize Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez for carrying that bill. It passed through the legislature practically intact due to that legislative leadership, but also due to the intensive stakeholdering processes that we went through to try to find out what objections we were going to get to the bill and work those out ahead of time.
Thanks. Penfield.
I'm going to stand if it's okay so I can see everybody a little bit easier. My name is Penfield Tate. I'm here to ask for your vote and your support to become your next city council person at large. I'm a longtime resident of Northeast Denver, first in Five Points and now in Park Hill. I'm a husband and I'm the father to a 33-year-old daughter with special needs who was raised in this community, and she was an East Angel, but don't hold that against me. I'm running because as I've walked through the neighborhood and as I've served before, there were times when I was your state representative in House District 8. There were times when I was your state senator in Senate District 33. And we did a lot of good work together. And as I walk through the neighborhood and talk to people, there is a feeling, it's a gut feel, that people have shared with me that something's not quite right with Denver. That we're not where we used to be. We're not the city we once were. We've slipped. And people are disoriented and they're concerned and they're worried about that and they want to get back on the right track. And I'm running to help us get back on the right track because I believe in results over rhetoric, which is what I gave you before when I was your state representative and I served you in the Senate. I hear people talk about 4 things they want the city to help fix, and that's what I want to do. Everybody's talked about affordable housing. We need to address it. I've actually done it. I passed tax incentives in the state legislature to fund affordable housing, and I'm glad to see, and I spoke with the representative earlier this week, I'm glad to see the legislature has got a rent control bill they're considering to provide another tool. I ran the bill in 2001, but I couldn't get enough votes to get it passed. Just think where we'd be if we had a tool like that for municipalities over the last 22 years. You know, we're a great city and we can be better, but we've got to be unhoused. This situation is not tenable, it's not responsible, and we can't excuse it anymore. We have got to dive in and invest massive resources if we want to see a change, because it's not good for their health and safety, it's not good for our neighborhoods and businesses, and it's just not the look that Denver wants and needs. Third, people talk about safety and crime and wanting to feel safe, but people also want a police department that makes them feel protected, not policed. You know, I had 3 uncles who were police officers, and one thing they taught me is that a police force is most effective when the members of the force reflect the community they're serving. I will push to change how we recruit members into the police force. And finally, one of the things that makes us great is we're out west, we have parks, we have open space, we have lost open space per resident. We need to preserve open space. It's what keeps Denver beautiful, and it's what gives us the lifestyle we want. Thank you.
Jeff.
Good evening. It's great to see so many people out. My name is Jeff Walker. I live in South Denver in the Rosedale neighborhood, if you're familiar with that, about a mile west of DU. I'm running for Denver City Council at large because I love this city. I moved here about 23 years ago in 1999 from Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, so the Rust Belt. I moved here because there's opportunity here that there was not, that I could not find in Ohio. People here are excited. I was working on a transit project back in Cincinnati to build a light rail line from the northern suburb down to the airport south of Cincinnati. Nobody wanted to pay for it. So in part of my job, I got to research other cities, and Denver was doing things. So here we go. Let's end up in Denver. So here I am. So since I've been here, I have served on Denver's planning board for about 6 years. I served on RTD's board of directors for 9 years. I was appointed to fill a vacancy, and then I was reelected twice. I served on the Elevate Denver and the Better Denver infrastructure and mobility bonds that were put before you in 2007 and 2017. I helped found my neighborhood organization, registered neighborhood organization, Rosedale Harvey Gulch Neighborhood Association. I've served on the American Public Transportation Association's Board of Directors, its Finance Committee, its Nomination Committee, and some other things like that. So I've done a lot, and I love doing things. I did not plan on running for office anymore. I was asked to sit on the task force to reimagine policing and public safety. And I said, you know what, I've done a lot, and I've always had this full-time job that's always been, keeps the lights on, but it's kind of a distraction to me because my passion, as you can probably tell, is really civic engagement and public involvement. So I said, why not? I'm not getting any younger. My brother passed away a little bit before that. My ex-wife had an aneurysm, 51 years old, so she lived with me for 3 years. I'm not getting any younger. This is something I have to do, something I need to do. So I'm doing it. And I think I have the qualifications, the skills, and the temperament to be a great city council member. I think you have a great selection of choices here. You have different styles, different strengths, different capabilities. I hope you find that I suit one of your 2 choices. My name is Jeff Walker, www.walker4denver, F-O-R, denver.com. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Marty.
Best for last. My name is Marty Zimmerman. Nice to see all of you here tonight. So just to kind of give you an idea, I have certain things in common with many of the other people on this esteemed panel, and then I have some things that make me a little bit different. So I'll start out with what I have in common. I am from Denver. I actually went to Manual High School, go Bolts, right? But the interesting thing about that is I was bused, and the bus picked me up at George Washington High School.
G-Dub.
So I could go, yeah, there we go. So I could go to Manual. As a whole, I am a parent. I have 2 children. I have a son who's a senior in high school, and a daughter who is a sophomore in college. I have been here my whole life, except for a series of about 10 years where I worked in other parts of the community. And on one of those travels, I actually went and got a master's of social work focused on nonprofit management. When I was in social work school, there was one commonality among every person who was there, and that is everyone who's going to be a social worker had some sort of traumatic incident happen to them in their childhood. And without fail, every single person, including me. My issue is that when I was 13 years old, my father went to prison for a crime he did not commit. I know he did not commit it because not just asking him, but he actually ultimately, they dropped the case because they had all kinds of flaws in the justice system, and how the jury and the judge interacted and how the attorneys. And there was actually a malpractice lawsuit that came out of this because there were so many egregious errors. As a 13-year-old, it really affects your view of what is right, what is wrong, what does government do, what does government not do. So, taking that, keeping it in mind, my whole reaction is, I'm not going to step up, I'm going to be sitting back and watch what everybody else does. And I became an observer. And as an observer, going to Manual High School, I saw a couple really, really sad things that were happening. For some reason, all of the people of color were dropping out of my class. They were getting poor education, they were being tracked into other classes that weren't appropriate, or they were just not getting resources, and there were too many other things that were distracting to them. And it came to a head at my graduation where one of the 6 black males who actually made it to graduation went up on stage and said, "Let me tell you what's really happening here." Totally took the mic, totally took over the entire situation, took over the graduation, and they shut off the mic. So he never got a chance to speak. And I had no idea what he was going to say, but I kind of felt something was just wrong.
Thank you.
So, am I out of time?
You are out.
Oh, jeez, sorry. I apologize. Well, thank you.
We're going to move on to the next question, and we'll start with Serena. This is a simple yes or no, please. Simple yes or no. Are you for rezoning all Denver neighborhoods for ADUs? Serena?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
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 Absolutely.
Of course. Thank you. Next question, and we'll start with Tim. Do you support, and again, just yes or no, please, do you support the proposed development at Park Hill Golf Course as set out in the current approved small area plan and development agreement?
Yes.
Maybe.
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
We'll start with Travis now, keeping track. We'll have 1 minute each for this, and timekeeping. If you are elected, what is one concrete thing you will do within the first 90 days to advocate for affordable housing for our neighbors who are struggling with regards to housing?
Start with me.
Yes.
The first things first. So something that I did not get to, so I'm going to take the balance of my previous time to just say I've spent time turning around organizations throughout the course of my career. Those that have been on the near brink of bankruptcy and saving them from insolvency. So with that managerial experience, I'm going to bring to City Council chambers a requirement to fast track approval processes for affordable housing, which means from the time of submitting the proposal to the time of approval and reaching council chambers, should it need council approval, that it's done within 6 months. Right now, we have projects that have been languishing for the last 18 months to 24 months, and that can't continue. So on day one, that's going to be something that I champion.
Great, thanks. Sarah?
2 things. Number 1, Denver needs to do what Salt Lake City did and what Boston's doing and audit all of our public land and buildings and treat those like a portfolio the way a private landholder would. Salt Lake unleashed within the first year of doing that more than its annual city budget for housing because we don't treat that land in any kind of systematic way. Number 2, we need a renter's bill of rights to include public enforcement of warrants of habitability, the right to counsel, rights to heat, rights to cooling, a long list of things.
I agree with Sarah. The city needs to audit and assess what land and buildings it owns. There are some vacant buildings, some underutilized buildings, some consolidations where perhaps we can make space available for some of the unhoused. Number 2, if the legislature approves the rent control bill, I'll work to introduce legislation to enable Denver to implement some form of rent control in the city and county of Denver.
Jeff?
I think the best way to make housing affordable isn't just the structure, but all of the all of the additional expenses that go into it. So I would like to expand the weatherization program. As you all know, the cost of utilities has skyrocketed, and that's a really unreliable source. And I would also like to expand rental assistance to help people stay in their houses and homes.
Thank you, Mike.
So my wife and I own a consulting firm that's worked with 400 plus nonprofits in the past 16 years, which I would have gotten into after the story. What I would do is take many of those connections that I have, and I would bring all of the voices to the table to say, what are the things that we could do for affordable housing? There are certain nonprofits, there are certain groups, there are certain communities that are not being included in saying, what is the solution? And not come up with the actual solution directly, but facilitate the conversation to say, hey, what are we doing? What are the opportunities? An audit is going to take too long. Permitting, I believe that that's also a good approach. However, I want to get the ones that are already planned, already going through permitting to move forward so that we can make sure that we're not languishing and shooting ourselves in the foot by trying to slow down affordable housing being built. Make those the priority, not other development.
Thank you. Will?
Everyone's already talked about streamlining permitting, so I won't belabor that point. What I'll add is just reforming our zoning code. So really thinking about how we're looking at adding to that option of housing, right? And so it's ridiculous that we have affordable housing and then we have luxury housing, and then it's like single family house, and that's it, right? And so how do we actually add stock to that? How do we add duplexes, multiplexes? How do we add condos back into the conversation so that we actually have options for Denver residents to fit whatever lifestyle you choose and want to live in, that we have housing for that, and we clear that path for it moving forward.
Good, thank you.
Thanks. Housing is a multi-layered approach. It's not just a one-size-fits-all. I think there are many answers to this issue. One of them, when we're talking about issues around rent control, I'm currently co-sponsoring it, and we actually have one of the sponsors here. But I also did sponsor the bill in 2019. I will continue to support those efforts. I also had the opportunity to work on inclusionary zoning, which has now been enacted at the city level to make sure that we are providing affordable housing and actually having a percentage of affordable housing that is supplied for new developments. And so I would want to continue to support those efforts and see how we can make an increase in those efforts. Lastly, dealing with folks that are unhoused, right? And on top of that, renter protections to keep people housed. But folks that are unhoused, there are supportive housing social impact bond currently in place that has had some proven outcomes. I want to explore how we continue to take what we've learned and how do we continue to invest in that so that we can make sure that our neighbors are being housed.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you. Two things. First, I would work on expanding some of the rental assistance programs that we have in the city. Far too many families are one unexpected medical bill or car payment away from being in really unstable settings as it relates to housing. So making sure that the local government is there as essentially a bridge to get people through those hard times is something that I would like to expand on. I think Will was touching a little bit on revisiting the zoning code here in Denver and looking at places across the city, not just in certain neighborhoods or districts, but across the city to allow density and infill where appropriate.
Great, thank you. Next question, we'll start with Sarah, and given the time, we'll just take 1 minute each on this. How will you work to improve transportation access and options for the city, especially transit, bike, and pedestrian access and safety?
Yeah, so I'm interested in the role that Denver right now is not allowed to compete with RTD for service, which sort of hampers what we can do. I certainly agree that we need shuttles and connectors to help solve the last mile problem, and that's a piece where Denver can play a role. But I'm also wondering if there's a bigger structural question there with respect to how we relate to RTD. For bikes, I'm a proponent of the VAMOS plan, which is this shared streets network that has been crowdsourced and created by a gentleman throughout the entire city that shows where the city could close off streets to through traffic that are already quiet kind of side streets, still allow the homeowners to pull in and park and do what they need to do, but open those to stroller moms and dads, bikes, people who are walking, people who are rolling in wheelchairs, and cars without the expense of building protected bike lanes, which takes a lot longer.
I support shared streets also, and I think I heard Councilwoman Sidawaka say we've got to break the monopoly. We're going. The scooters and all of these things are here to stay. We need to open that market up. We also need to do something differently, I believe, in terms of implementation. You know, you see these white poles go up in all the streets all over the city, but streets that used to be there aren't there anymore. And I see people stop in the middle of intersections and look around. We've got to do a better job talking with people in the neighborhood so that they understand what we're trying to do to implement it, because it's not safe for anybody. And finally, Jeff, we need to have a conversation about RTD. I do think we can do some things to address the last mile, but we have a regional transportation district for a reason. And we need to talk with RTD and the region and figure out what that role is going to be, and if it continues, or if we all need to start looking at different solutions.
Thank you. Jeff?
Sidewalks that access bus stops. There are parts of Colorado Boulevard, Sheridan Boulevard, I'm sure in this neighborhood, all over the city where people cannot get to the bus stop, where even people who are able-bodied, people who do not need mobility devices cannot get to bus stops because the sidewalks do not exist, and that's a shame, shame, shame. I think we need better, slower speeds on the streets on our high injury network, even if they're state operated. I used to work for CDOT. I know there's a way to get there. We should not accept over 70 people a year in this city, just in this city, being killed on our streets anymore. And then working with RTD and finding out the best way to connect that last mile and first mile. I was on the board for 9 years. RTD is strapped, and it's kind of at the whim of developers and the city and the zoning code to where it can operate. Thank you.
Marty.
So I want to call out a person who's not here, Councilwoman Amanda Sawyer, because Amanda Sawyer actually asked RTD to come and start reporting on a regular basis to City Council, saying what is going on and how do we know, how do we handle things, and ask questions like the bus stops and the sidewalks, and because her office is receiving all of these different kinds of questions, kind of like you are. For me, I believe in the sidewalks. I'm very much in favor of the Vamos Shared Street Network, but also I think that there's some partnerships that need to be happened with RTD. In a place like San Francisco, for a district area that is similar in size, they have 5 different regional transportation districts. We have one that's doing rural, city, and everything else. So I think we need to figure out how do we separate it, how do we make it so it can be efficient.
Thanks.
We need to have a Department of Transportation, period, right? Like right now, it's like we have DOTI is Department of Transportation Infrastructure, so you have sewage in the same conversation as multimodal microtransit, and that's ridiculous. And so I think if we can break it apart and actually have a focus, like to build a city that's not just for cars, for microtransit, multimodal use, for different ways for people to get around, and really think about how we can offset and create that Department of Transportation. We can supplement RTD, like Boulder does, in the short term, with the long-term outcome of having that Department of Transportation. One of my goals is really thinking about how we have better connectivity within our neighborhoods, and really pushing to have free and public, free transit for all residents in the city and county of Denver. And thinking about that last mile, but it's a catch-22. We need to have people using buses to be able to get more service. And so pushing for that free service, that was a great success in August with free RTD, and pushing for that.
Thanks.
I, honestly would want to do what I do best, and that is listening to the community and listening to the residents of the city and county of Denver and hear from them what is the best way in which they get around the city. Is that walking? Or do we have safe sidewalks? Is it, public transit? Making sure that we have frequent and consistent buses. Every 15 minutes, we shouldn't have to be standing around for 30 minutes for a bus. And I know all too well what that is like. I had a job back in the day working in a juvenile correctional facility where I had to go from 38th and Lowell to Wadsworth and Hampton. I worked the swing shift, 2 p.m. I leave my house at 10 a.m. to get to my job at 2 o'clock. That's unacceptable.
Thanks. Tim?
We need to build out the complete sidewalk network so that people who are in wheelchairs using walkers or otherwise trying to get to bus stops or from point A to point B can do so without having to compete with cars on the road. A lot of people have talked about the Shared Streets program. I'm a big supporter of that, and where appropriate, having protected bike lanes as well. It doesn't have to be an either or, and I think a lot of the frustration that people have moving around this city by car or by bike or scooter or whatever else, is that there are times where there's protected bike lanes that go for a couple of blocks and then just end. And especially if you're a cyclist, that's terrifying, but also if you're driving in a car, that's very confusing and dangerous for you as well. I understand that really most people in this room drove cars tonight, including myself. I'm not saying that we should ban cars. I do think that if we give people more options, it's going to be beneficial for everybody, especially car drivers.
Thanks. Travis?
Well, an all-hands-on-deck approach. I've been on the campaign trail for the last 10 months, and so I've pinpointed a couple of transit needs that are in each council district. So in the context of council districts 9, 8, 5, and 10, and a little bit of 4, we're talking about the Colfax BRT and finally getting that done. The first conversation about Colfax BRT was in 1991. And so here we are in 2023, and we're still having a conversation. It's going to be done in hopefully 2026. Let's talk about sidewalks. If you want to see the inequities in urban planning, look no further than the sidewalks. In Council District 3, there is a severe inequity in terms of sidewalk infrastructure that we need to fix. Council District 2, that's Kevin Flynn's district, they're talking about just having some micromodal transit access like scooters just to get from point A to point B. So we need to be able to expand that. Council District 8, let's talk about speeding along MLK as well as Central Park Boulevard. What we need to do is start implementing speed reductions as well as bike infrastructure.
Thanks. We're going to move on with one last question, 1 minute each, because it's getting late. I think it's time to go home. And we'll start with Penfield. Candidates often focus on what they want to change in the city, but give us an example of a city department or program you think is successful.
I think the STAR program has been successful. I think changing how 911 calls are addressed is important. Not every call requires a pistol, a taser, or a billy club, and it's important to have other people in the cars to help address community needs. Although we are severely behind, I think we've made some progress as a community in terms of at least opening shelters for the unhoused during these unacceptably cold periods of time. It's a start, but we need a more permanent solution and a long-term solution, and hopefully with a plan to transition folks out of being unhoused into being housed in some fashion.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks. I'll agree with Penfield Take the STAR program. I went on a ride along a week and a half ago. It was a swing shift from 4 p.m. to about 11:30 midnight, and I saw what cops do on a Monday night, not a Friday night in the summer. What I saw was officers who responded to calls, at least one call that I was on that, where a co-responder also was there. I got to talk with the officer I was with, and she mentioned how often that they get called out to calls that they're really not certified, trained to handle, and that the STAR program is a much better method for handling people that are in emotional distress, chemical dependency distress at the time than they are. So that's one that I've seen kind of firsthand that I support and I would like to see expanded.
Great. So there are two that really stand out. I really like the Denver Economic Development Office. I like the fact that they help people start businesses, that they give resources, that they give micro grants. I like the fact that they are building the workforce for tomorrow and are thinking about what is the workforce of tomorrow while also trying to help people today. And then the second one is the Office of Housing Stability. I think that they have been given an incredibly impossible task of how do we address issues of homelessness, how do we address issues of migrants coming in, and they have worked really, really hard, and they've been able to address many of the issues. There's so much more that can be done, but they do get kudos because they've done an amazing job of trying to help stabilize our city.
So Marty took my answer. I currently work for Denver Economic Development Opportunity and implemented a lot of the programs he was talking about. So I will shift and just talk about libraries. I think libraries as that welcoming space, right, that is open and equitable for everyone in our communities. That you have free resources. How can we expand the services, the housing navigators that they have, the technology and computers for all the populations that are coming through those doors. But also, like, what can we do more? Can we add like free menstrual products for all? Like, thinking about reproductive justice in a different way. Like, what else can we do with our free and public services and sites like the library?
I look at what are the basic needs that folks have in our city, and I think it all stems from our Department of Human Services. And maybe I'm a little partial. I worked there for 8 years, previous career, and currently continue to partner with Denver Human Services, providing everything from child welfare, child protection, to adult protection, to TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, to SNAP benefits, to child care assistance. There is just a breadth of services that are provided through this department. On top of, I have many former colleagues who stepped up, when we had, a lot of the homeless shelters, and they were there working during COVID. They were putting themselves on the line, and they were those essential workers making sure that our city was still running.
Thanks, Tim.
CASR, which is the entity that runs the e-bike rebate program that actually I think there was a round that took place today, another round of e-bikes that rebates that sold out very, very quickly. It's an innovative program that's taken place over now several rounds that is also targeted to help make sure that people at different incomes are able to get access to e-bikes, and it also makes sure that the rebates are being used at local shops in and around Denver, so it allows people to move around the city in a different way, and it also boosts economic development. It's a program that's being replicated in other cities around the country, so I give great kudos to those folks.
Thanks.
I'd like to give a shout out to the arts and venues as well as parks and recreation. To be able to endure what they endured during the pandemic should be lauded. And I hope that whatever the secret sauce is in terms of their staff retention, recruitment, and program deliverables can be replicated throughout the other departments of the city. Recent reports have suggested that we're down about 7% in terms of our city workforce. So I would like to work in partnership with the other council members to make the city and county of Denver a place where people want to work again. I often say along the trail, people do not leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses, and we need to be able to cultivate and steward top talent and innovation to make sure that this is a place where people want to be, work, innovate, create, and recreate.
Thanks.
Yeah, so two things. I think, actually, I have a long list. There's a lot that's going great in Denver. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I think Host is a really innovative, young, new agency that's making a lot of the right moves, but probably needs quite a bit of funding. And I'm seeing them committed to a housing first model, which is the way to solve homelessness in our city. I also think that CASR, as Tim mentioned, is starting to tackle climate change in a much more comprehensive way. I'm hoping they'll move more towards equitable decarbonization, where it's not just for wealthy folks that can take advantage of those technologies. And I just want to say, Denver has the best vehicle renewal registration of anywhere I've ever lived. You get the little paper in the mail. It has your VIN number on it, so you don't have to go out to your car and look at the VIN number. It has a QR code. You can just type it in and pay. You don't have to go anywhere. Well done.
Please join me in thanking the candidates for being here. Appreciate you making time to be here. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Is it possible to do a group picture? How would we figure that out?
She's going to be able to get us another shot.
That's what we're going to figure out.
It's all folks are bad.
You know?
You want the whole table?
Hey, it's good to see you. How are you?
Good. Have you gotten to know Serena yet?
Oh, yeah.
So we just got a...
Yeah, I have. I know Serena since she was a baby. Here they go. Hey, Serena, somebody asked me, did I get a chance to meet her? I said, I knew her since she was a baby.
Say that again?
They asked did I know you. I said, I've been knowing her since she was a baby.
Yes.
Uh-oh,
He knew me before I was born.
Yes. So, yeah. Amazing job. Good job. Good job, everybody. No, you're good.
Yeah, I'm all about courtroom history.
Where will that picture show up? And do you mind if I link to it?
Yeah, sure. I'll if you give me your another one of those cards, I'll email it to you.
720.
Did you video or just
And then Cornwell.
So that's online. Always on. I'll see you in the link. All right.
Let me put it in there for you. I'm going to save you some time to do this for you. Oh, that's terrible. I'm blind. You're deaf, I'm blind. Okay. Because I can barely see your screen here. Okay, so this is my phone number. Feel free to call me, text me, call me, use my passport. I'm also, no, I'm in Council District 1. Northwest. Yeah, right.